Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. This is a return guest. This is episode 208 that you're about to listen to. This is Amir. He was on the show about a little over a year ago at the beginning of 2024. And this is a unique kind of conversation. When I set out to do the podcast, I was trying, I've had in mind merging my Christian upbringing with mental health, mental illness, obviously both very large subjects, right? You could just do a Christian podcast. There's a lot of that out there. That's not what I entirely wanted to do. I've wanted to merge the two. And this is just a unique conversation. My friend Max was struggling with some things that I think are probably in the religious trauma category, which is something you guys might be familiar with. You might not be. When we hear the word trauma, we don't always necessarily associate that with religion. When we hear the word religion, we can think, what does that mean? We're not a part of that because we maybe don't identify with that, but we have a faith. They're both complex terms. And to combine the two, I do think it's a real thing. I think people struggle with disappointment and wanting to have, I would say, in air quotes, a pure faith that's not convoluted or distorted by wrong ideas about God, but we have to do a lot of filtering in our experiences. And so I'm giving kind of a long introduction just to not warn you, but to prepare you that my kind of response to these things, it is a lot of me maybe trying to not coach but understand where my friend's coming from. So I hope you guys enjoy this. It's a little different, but I think it's worth putting out there because I do think these things are important, and I would love to continue talking about some of these things maybe in some solo episodes, or doing some more deconstruction-y kind of talks with some people in the future as well. I do think it is important to the journey I've been on. So here is my episode with Max Amir. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. Here it is.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been crazy this
Okay.
past year since,
Okay.
I was on the podcast last. And I don't want to say things have gotten better because they definitely haven't, but I think I've become more mature in how I handle situations or how I talk.
Okay.
And um yeah, man, it's been tough, and I just want to let people know that it's okay to tell people that things haven't been getting better.
Right.
Everyone feels scared to say that to somebody.
Yeah. So for you, how long have you felt that way? Like since we talked last, or what would you have a number? Like 3 months, a week,
I've 9 years, my brother, 9 years.
9 years? Okay, nine
Yeah.
years. So you're 17, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, and I think last podcast we talked about medications, and you were saying that you feel over medicated, and we talked about feeling numb, and I something I relate to. I've been on meds since 2007, 8, that's a while. I
Hmm.
mean, that I'm 39 and I got on meds when I was 22 pretty much. So,
Yeah.
technically 23 because I was on them and then I got off them. But yeah, that's a while. That's like almost 20 years, and 3 years from now is, But
Yeah.
so what is your diagnosis again?
Uh,
Do you have
uh,
one?
I have a lot of them, honestly,
Right.
so many. Like,
I mean, but what does the
you know,
medicine treat?
depression, anxiety, bipolar.
Okay.
Um, uh,
All right.
I have something called FASD, which is fetal alcoholic syndrome. So
Right.
I also take medication for that.
And that was because your parents were that's where the mom is drinking when
Yeah,
she's pregnant.
Yeah, I
Gotcha.
was
Gotcha.
very lucky not to come out because a lot of kids who have that come out have it like severely disabled, and I was just by pure luck and chance was able to not, come out like that.
Okay. Okay. I didn't know that. I don't remember that from last time, but I was having to listen to our episode to refresh.
Yeah. I may have
I
not have
don't
shared it.
remember things that I like. I've had so many conversations on here. It's hard to
Yeah.
remember everything, but
Mhm.
and just my memory is not great with a lot of things. But like okay, so and then what's the medication journey? You know, are you still on meds? What's going on? Are you messing with meds? What's the
False
thing?
hope. False
Okay,
hope, man. It's like I was adopted, of course, and I have my parents. I don't call like people get confused because I call them my parents and they get confused. I call my adopted parents my parents because that's they adopted me at birth, so that's how I see them. That's they're my parents. To me, those are my parents. You know what I mean? So when I say parents, I mean my adopted parents. I don't mean my
gotcha.
birth parents. But
Yeah, and you were how old were you when you got adopted?
I was practically from birth who had to be.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay,
It's so like my parents say, or at least like I say too. It's just false hope, man. It's like the hope that a new psychologist comes to us and says, "Here is this medicine that might work." Gives
right,
us false hope, gives us false motivation for it then to not work. And you repeat the cycle like 20, 30 times of a different psychiatrist, a different this and that, a different person saying, maybe try this,
right,
maybe try that. Getting having to get weaned off medicine on the daily and then put back on it. It's just I definitely stick to my word when I feel like over medication can be a
sure.
problem.
So, well, yeah, I'm interested in that, and I've mentioned that on here many times because, um, yeah, well, okay, so let me ask you a couple questions though. Like, what does that mean? Like, what do you take? Are you on like three different things? Wh-
Five, maybe
Five?
six. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's a lot.
Hmm.
So, and is that because now are you seeing the same kind of doctor every time, or is that like been
Nope.
moved around? Because sometimes that can happen.
It is my fault for acting out because I have never trusted doctors and I've never, ever since I had a bad experience with
Right.
mandated reporters, I've never trusted anybody in the system. So
I
every
gotcha.
single time, I get a new psychiatrist or doctor, if I'm not feeling them, I just act out. And I think that's my fault. So it's just
Right.
switching doctors a lot.
So what does act out mean? Because we talked on the last podcast about um you like anger and outburst, and you were asking me if I did that. And
Yeah.
that's not really been my style. I've been more on the side of not acting out, not suppressing. I had one act out when I was suicidal. I got the police called on me,
Yeah.
and and I called my dad, and I think that was me struggling and me struggling with my relationship with my dad. So I
Yeah.
wanted him to come and see me in a bad place because I was blaming him for my bipolar.
Yeah. Real.
So no, for real, yeah. And it's like, wow, that sounds crazy. And it's like, no, it's not. That's not that crazy. It's just I was blaming my dad before I had bipolar or whatever, right? And then some people could say, well, you've had it since birth. So yeah, five or six things just to go back to you here is a lot. And then you're saying you act out. So what is that? What are you doing?
My I've realized that like I I don't know how to say this without sounding like egotistical, like because it's honest. It seems like the way I'm saying it, it seems like something I'd be happy about, but it's actually like kind of ruined my life in a way. But I've realized that I'm so smart that I'm really good at being manipulative and most importantly vindictive. I remember shit and I hold shit, and I'm so willing to play the waiting game. It's unbelievable how
Okay.
much I would do out of spite.
All right.
You know.
So are you saying that you lie?
I think I control. I think I control, and
Okay.
obviously, it's obviously like everyone knows this. Every person. it gets told, you try to control situations from a lack of control you feel in your own life, or you feel yourself, and that's absolutely true. There's no argument for that.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of fear in that, right? Like people who are
Yeah.
controlling are actually like it's some kind of fear and it comes across as a different issue, right? Kind of is
Yeah.
connected to like power, right? Like power and
Hmm.
control is those are the two things that are can be very evil, right?
Yeah.
Depending on, the more power you have, the more you don't want to lose your
That's
power. It feels like something
that's
you
so
see in a,
weird.
it feels like, what's up?
I was just saying that's so weird, like, because I think back to me and I think I've never wanted power. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've never been a person that likes attention. Like my whole life, I've been an introvert, and I'm just starting to like not be an introvert. And actually, I think that sometimes I force myself to be an extrovert, but I never really got like attention
Mm-hmm.
growing up. And so through that of being alone, I've been stuck inside my mind with just me and only me for so long
Mm-hmm.
that I don't even feel the need for attention.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
like,
you're like entertaining yourself with your own
yeah,
thoughts,
that's
even
how
if,
you become numb.
yeah, well, even if you're going to a dark place.
Yeah.
Well, right now, I guess I keep referencing our last talk, realizing that people would have to go listen to that to understand in this
Yeah.
conversation what we're talking about. So maybe I'll just try not to reference the last talk so much. But
Yeah.
um yeah, well, we did talk about numbness. I've talked about it on here in solo episodes. And I had a person on my podcast named Michelle back in March, April, and she basically got off medication and found a way to not go back to it with the bipolar diagnosis. And she was over medicated too. And so, yeah, there is, I mean, the purpose of this talk is not to go into that too much but yeah, you are experiencing part of the struggle, which is like you see a doctor, you tell them how you're doing, and for the most part, they don't really do much therapy with you, right? A psychiatrist. I had some of that with the doctor that I had for a while. Anyway, point being, yeah, all they can really do, and this is not to like minimize what doctors do, but from a patient perspective, this can be frustrating because you say, "Hey, I'm struggling," and then if their response is, "Hey, try this new medication,"
Yeah.
right? You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
it's not really even funny. I mean, it's kind of funny, but if you go from having like two things that are treating your diagnosis, and then all of a sudden over the next few years, now you're what did you say? You're on like five or six things or seven?
Hmm.
Did you say seven?
Five or six. It has been seven at times.
Right. So ideally, the doctor shouldn't be doing that, right? They shouldn't be. I would say a good doctor doesn't do that. They don't just keep adding things because you keep struggling. Right.
Yeah.
Now it's complicated because you could have like four different you could be showing symptoms and there's like an overlap, right? Depression and anxiety overlap, ADHD overlaps, schizophrenia maybe not so much, but like you can have schizophrenia and
Any.
bipolar. Yeah, so you
Yeah.
want to be honest with the doctor, but anyway, long story short, basically it's like, yeah, that's a lot and the doctor shouldn't be doing that, but then well, what do you do? Do you just keep finding different doctors? Do you have the resources to do that? Um, as much as we could complain about being over medicated, you could think it's a lot of work to find
Mhm.
somebody new and get yourself back down to maybe two medications. But then even with that, there's always side effects of everything. So it's complicated, man. So, but you feeling numb,
Mhm.
um, I mean, that's not a great thing to feel, right? I mean, there's a part of you that might like that. I think we talked about that last time.
Yeah.
So, what are you struggling with in terms of why do you feel hopeless? Because that's kind of how this conversation started on Instagram.
Yeah.
And I was pushing back saying there has to be something that gives you hope.
I don't
So
I don't
what
care
is
enough about things
right?
to let them give me hope.
Okay. Okay. So it's kind of like apathy, like deep apathy, like not
Yeah.
caring at all.
Yeah. But I think about also like I do care about things like a big thing is like I have a girlfriend, and I've had a girlfriend for a while and I just don't I love her to death. Like she's probably the only person that I care about more than myself. And I've like done a lot to change myself for her. And that's the only reason I can talk about being hopeless and this and that is because as much as I am hopeless, I'm secure in my hopelessness in the sense that like I'm stable enough myself because, I have her that like, I'm able to talk about these things so freely. And your first thought is, well, if he cares about her, then that's something to hope for. But here's what I'd say. If I had to choose not being here anymore or her, I choose not being here.
Okay. Well, all right. So let's break that down. Like hopelessness is real, and then it's also mixed in with apathy.
Hmm.
You have this person that cares about you. So on a surfacey level, if someone didn't know you very well, but then you disclosed that you had a girlfriend, I forgot about that part. We probably talked
Hmm.
about that before.
Yeah.
But I could go, well, there's one person that you have that loves you. Like in your mind, you could, my
Yeah.
follow-up question could be like, well, what about all the people that love you? Someone
Hmm.
else probably would ask you that too,
Yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
for a human being to go around in life and say, no one loves me, right? That could be true. That could be someone's experience. But that's still as much as like I feel like, and maybe that's me being too optimistic or something, but I'm like, I have a hard time that it's no one. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so the assumption is like the more people that love you, even if you don't love yourself very much, the better that's going to help you more in the long term, even when you're struggling. Because it's like well, you have people that you could be motivated to get better for them. Right now, there's it's still more complicated than that because your view of yourself also matters too, and that can be unrelated to how people feel about you. So you can have like love in your life, but then still have like self-hatred, which seems to kind of be like those things
I
cancel each other out. Right?
I
Like,
want to tell you,
yeah. No, because
I
I've struggled with that in my
yeah.
suicidality, had all these
Mm.
people loving me, but I hated myself. Now, it was also brought
You
on by getting off the meds that didn't
yeah.
help, but there was something else going on too. Like, yeah, it's sabotaging all of the love that was given to me, you know?
Hmm.
So, anyway, yeah.
You know, I had I had an experience recently. I kind of you know I did something a little fucked up. I don't really want to talk about it because it is still kind of fresh and it's kind of still kind of hurts, gives me a pit in my stomach. But I definitely messed up and I lost somebody I care about.
Okay.
And they hate me, and I don't quite care as much as I would like to because no one can hate me as much as I hate myself. Like you don't
Right.
like me, that makes two of us.
Right. Right.
So I'm not. Like and then I felt like through that I felt like a piece of shit even more because I'm like I should care more about this, you know what I mean? But I'm like,
Right.
you put it in your head it was bound to happen anyways. You were bound to do this. It was always like, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Well, yeah. So, what is fueling the hatred of yourself? Like what is where is do you think that is coming from? Because it, I mean, yeah, again, also complicated because I'm not inside of your mind. And
Yeah,
if you see a therapist, they try to get inside your head some, depending on what you share with them.
yeah,
And I'm trying to get inside your head a little bit also
Hmm.
as your friend too,
Yeah.
not just you're on my podcast, right?
Yeah.
Because I do relate to a lot of this stuff. Like for me to say I've never dealt with self-hatred would be a total lie, right? And on the level of community I've had in my life that I've talked about on here, and that I just exist has
Yeah.
always been very strong, right? I've always had lots of I just spent Christmas with my, my family, which was amazing.
Hmm.
I spent the weekend in Sacramento with a friend and also so I'm not sure on like, oh, who am I going to call when I'm
Yeah.
in struggle, but it does feel like a strange thing to like also have such deep self-hatred when you have people loving you.
Yeah.
But it sounds like, but then it's like, what's fueling you not liking yourself? Like,
Um, you want to know, like, I can't tell. Like, this is kind of off topic, but kind of on topic at the same time. It's just because I'm gonna, like when we're talking, it's like if it pops in my mind, something that has definitely fueled self hatred too is just like religion. I don't mean to like if it's a sensitive thing, but every single person in my family are Christians, like Bible
okay,
reading Christians, and I
okay,
am not. I'm definitely not. I am a full hardcore atheist, and I've been ostracized from my family. And I used to think like maybe the reason I don't believe in God is because I think I'm going to hell. You know what I mean? Like I
right,
used to think stuff like that.
right,
And I I've came to the conclusion that uh, the beauty of this world is that we're all entitled to what makes us feel comfortable. Everyone, all humans just want to feel comfortable. All humans just want to believe that they'll get to feel safe. You know what I mean? That's honestly just a human need. So if it makes someone feel better and help them deal with the unknown and helps them get that pit out of their stomach when they're sitting there in the middle of the night to believe that there's someone watching over them and controlling what they do and whether they're good or bad, then more power to you. I think I don't believe in religion, but I think it's very needed because I think people need to feel safe, and if we didn't feel safe,
right,
the world would be a horrid place. But I've gone to church before, and I've had pastors and people tell me I'm the devil and I'm going to hell, and
right.
I've felt ostracized and rejected.
Yeah.
So it's a
Okay.
big reason
Well,
why.
yeah. Well, um, yeah. I mean, okay. My experience of being a Christian my whole life, right,
Hmm.
is that there is a difference between religion
Hmm.
and quote unquote kind of like telling someone it's more about some kind of relationship with God
Yeah.
than an actual religion, because the sort of destructive view of God
Hmm.
is perpetuated by some kind of quote unquote like religious spirit, right? Meaning like
Yeah.
what you read in the Bible,
Hmm.
Jesus in the Gospels, it's supposed to not be a religion, right? It's
Yeah.
supposed to just be, hey, follow me, right? But then everything that um a lot of times your experience of going to church is not just some simple pure
Yeah.
hey, I just follow God and I'm not a part of a religion, right? It's very
Yeah.
hard to like not conflate the two, but God is bigger than any kind of religion and bigger
Yeah.
than any kind of thing you see in church. And yes, church can be a very confusing place for a lot of people. That's why people have been deconstructing for a long time now,
Hmm.
kind of saying, like, hey, the God of the Bible is not the same as, this evangelical
Hmm.
Christianity that we experience in America. And that's why you see lots of scandals and pastors and just all kinds of chaos. And you're like,
Yeah.
I don't think this is what
They
God
s-
is wanting from us, right?
sounds so
But
scary, man. It
yeah,
just they
well, yeah,
sound so they
right,
sound like they sound so scary. Like you
right,
shall repent, you shall do this, we shall give our life. It just sounds like
sure.
a almost a cult to me.
Well,
And I never.
it can be in a lot of environments. It can be very cult like if it
Hmm.
actually is a cult, Probably not, but
Yeah.
cult like tendencies are there depending on
Mhm.
what kind of like denomination it is. So yeah, it can be confusing, but I do um
Hurts, man.
well, yeah, and the idea is it's easier to tell someone um
Mhm.
essentially something that's true that they should be experiencing that they're not,
Yeah.
right? So it'd be easier to just say, "Hey Max, the solution for you is to not hate yourself because
Mhm.
God doesn't hate you, right?" And you could be like, wow, well, that's not a very,
Yeah.
you could go,
Like,
well, that's not, you could get mad at me for saying that and go, that's not a
mhm.
very profound thing, right? Like, I still hate myself. Like, what's the solution? And I do think it's found in some kind of view of God because
Yeah.
what you're experiencing is um,
Mhm.
kind of like the shadow side of the thing that's going to help you,
Yeah.
you know?
I think, well, I just wanted to say, like, for example,
Yeah.
I've only met one person who believes in God that I can actually talk to. And that would be my grandfather who has passed away. And he just every word he spoke, out of every word of that man's mouth was beautiful. And I mean,
Okay.
like he didn't come to me and give me the story about the Bible. He didn't come to me and give me all these things I have to think about. He said, "You will find God when you're ready, or you won't." He doesn't. He doesn't. He said, and I used to think I was going to hell, and he said, "Someone who doesn't believe in God can't go to heaven or hell." You know what I mean? Like he just made me feel better, even if it was something that he didn't quite, you know what I mean, quite believe in. You know what I mean? He was
Hmm.
just such. He is a person. If God was real, I believe that he was with that man because the way he spoke
Right.
about him was so. Just he took every bit of ego out of it. He took every single bit of you know uh opinion out of it, and he just spoke. You know what I mean? He didn't try
Right.
to force me to believe in anything. And it just felt so good to hear someone say, either God will come to you or you won't. I don't have to. It just felt, so good to
Right.
hear like
Right.
things like that. And it hurts to hear my other family be like, if you don't do this, you're going to hell. If you don't do
Hmm.
that, and it's made me feel like a loser.
Right.
I used to only go to Sunday school because my friend was going. Like that's how, what I mean, I wanted to fit in so bad. And when I questioned things and their parents found out, they just shunned me. Like, I would I would question after question after question after question because none of it made logical because faith. If faith was real, we wouldn't need faith. You can't argue with a person who believes in God because their whole religion is based upon something that is non observable.
Right.
So whenever you try to say something to them or a question, I'm not going to say logic or not logic because then that gets controversial, but just a simple question of wanting to know. If they
Right.
don't know, you know what I mean? They get defensive or because you always hear Christians say, "Well, this is why I think this happened," or "This is why I think God did this." But when you're atheist, everything is absolute fact. And I think atheism is just for people who can't fathom not being able to see something in front of their eyes, you know?
Right.
Like I don't want
Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah, kind. I mean, in a general sense, you could argue like there are parts of Christianity
to.
where people say, there's evidence for like the Shroud of Turin, right, which is like
Yeah.
the picture of Jesus in the the
Hmm.
the grave, and you see his reflection on the thing, right? There's
Yeah.
pieces of like Noah's Ark and the Dead Sea
Hmm.
Scrolls. And you could say to someone who has more of a like give me the evidence mindset, right? You could
Hmm.
maybe assume everyone should want that, right? Like
Yeah.
prove to me it's real, right?
Yeah.
And I think in a lot of ways you really can't prove it, right? Like God really can't even be proved. And I mean there's
Yeah.
some people who would like Bill Nye the Science Guy debating that one Christian
Hmm.
movie or something, right?
Hmm.
I don't even think I watched it. I just heard about it, right? And it's like,
Hmm.
Bill Nye the Science Guy won,
Yeah.
right? And you'd be like, wow, this is a blow to Christians, And it's like, there is no proof, right? I mean, even if you pull up the stuff that's like the physical evidence of something that's in the Bible stories,
Hmm.
I think it's easier to just tell people, maybe easier is not the right word. It's more just like, hey, I have this faith
Yeah.
my how I believe God to be real is how I feel, right?
Yeah.
And how and then right, that could be even more evidence or more not evidence, more fuel to
Yeah.
the atheistic person that
Hmm.
God is not real because you're just saying, well, it's
Yeah.
based on how I feel. And it's like
I.
somebody could start a cult based
Uh-huh.
on how they feel. Like
Exactly.
Stalin, not Stalin,
Hmm.
Russia, Ukraine, that's based on how Putin feels. He just feels like blowing up another country
Yeah.
because they're not, doing what he wants them to do. And here we are
Hmm.
almost 3 years later and the war's still going on.
Yeah.
Israel, Hamas is based on how someone feels, right? And so you
Yeah.
go, well, it goes both ways. Like you could
Hmm.
feel and it could be totally evil, and you
Yeah.
could feel and it could totally be like, I believe God is loving and I believe God is good. And so it's like, well, which one do you know what I mean? So trying to go
Yeah.
after evidence
Hmm.
um is not always really like the
Yeah. And
thing,
let me tell you, like, here's an emotion I'm feeling right now as you're talking.
Right.
Pure anger. And the reason I'm feeling angry is because I wish, I wish so badly that my parents and my cousins and my family talk to me the way you did. Just a normal conversation back and forth. I can
Hmm.
see your point, you can see mine. And when you talked, I felt pure jealousy and pure anger. Nothing else but that. Because
Hmm.
all I was thinking of
Yeah.
flashbacks of all those times I could have been talked to how you're talking to me, and yet I wasn't. You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah, I got that. Yeah. Well, yeah, that can be disappointing. And you do need to have some, not need like telling you what to do, but it would be helpful for you. Just use the word helpful. I had a girl
Yeah.
on my podcast that used that word a lot, and I was like, I like it. Helpful is helpful would be having a strong sense of community where people are able to not try to just tell you what to do and like spoon feed you the platitudes of like the Bible just says this and you just need to obey and blah 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 blah, right? That doesn't really
Yeah.
work very well
It's-
unless you're open to that, and then sometimes that's not even a conversation. That's just like,
yeah.
yeah, why don't you tell me something I already know, right?
Yeah.
Which happens when you've been in the system of church for a long time. You just hear a lot of the same things and you're like either A, I'm just like what's the reason why I'm not doing these things, right?
Hmm.
Like and so yeah, you do need some different experiences that would be more
Yeah.
pure and would the fruit of those talks would be like
Hmm.
having like a balanced view of who God is, not um, someone who's confirming the things that are making you miserable.
Yeah. Because,
Right.
like, when I,
And the whole
yeah.
hell thing, anyway, the hell thing is a big thing because it's like, yeah, dude, there's a punitive view of God, and the ultimate view of that punishment would be something like hell, right?
It's
And
like,
that's perpetuated by people. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, when, like, for example, if I'm hearing the stories of Jesus over and over again, like, at least personally for me, I don't doubt Jesus existed, but I've always been like, if I'm hearing his stories over and over again, I think, like, God damn, Jesus was a con man. Religion was, like, invented when the first con man met the first fool. You know what I mean?
Right, right,
Like religion is giving people hope in a world torn apart by religion. Like, when you say the same thing over and over again, then you start to piece things together. You know what I mean? Like, at least for me, like,
right,
after hearing these stories of these self-righteous people, to me, it seems like religion is all about ego. Like, they believe that they have something that I don't. You know what I mean?
right.
Like a special relationship with God that's going to pay off for them in the afterlife. Like, they're so much better. You know?
Well, yeah, you could say cult leaders have that kind of thing. I'm not an expert on cults, but just in a general sense, right? It's people getting formed around a very dynamic personality that
Hmm.
is kind of like the way, the truth, and the life, as Jesus is saying that about himself. They're saying that about their dogma or their doctrine, and
Yeah.
you're attracted to the charisma that they have, but you could get so sucked into it and not even be paying attention to, well, what is this
Yeah.
person really actually saying? And they could just be so charismatic that you just block
Hmm.
out what they actually believe, and then you're
Yeah.
like, yeah, I mean, part of the challenge is that when you're younger,
Hmm.
whatever view your parents have, you just take that on. Especially if you've been growing up in church your whole life, you just default to like parents and then the people at church and then
Yeah.
like your peers, and
But I
then,
never did. I never
well,
did, and
yeah,
that's
yeah.
why,
And so you're getting to an age where, yeah, you, the invitation, which could give you hope, although this is hard and this is part of
hmm
probably what you're struggling with, is like you need some new experiences of your
yeah.
own that would be different than what you're experiencing, is like religious trauma, and
Hmm.
also a view of God that I think is incorrect, but
I think it is
it's
too.
easier. It's
100%. I
easier,
agree.
yeah, for sure. And it's even me saying, "Oh, it's incorrect." It's like, well, I've
Mhm.
thought those things about God too. So you're not
Yeah, and even
like
me
I've
agreeing,
right,
even me
yeah,
agreeing is like,
right. Well,
and yeah.
okay. So like here's part of it. Part of it is, what is the fruit of anybody's message? And
Mhm.
people listening who are like not in the faith are like, what does the word fruit mean? Because they're probably thinking bananas, apples, oranges.
Yeah.
What do you mean fruit? Right? Fruit Loops. Okay. I think I had some Fruit Loops recently, so not a healthy breakfast. No, I'm just kidding. But fruit, like the fruit of the message, right? In the scripture, there's the fruit of the spirit. It's like these
Hmm.
9 things that all seem like pretty good things: love, joy, peace. And the idea is that, yeah, someone could be in some kind of congregation preaching some kind of message,
Hmm.
and you could just be sitting there and you could just be like, I don't know about this, right? This feels weird. And then you
Yeah.
could feel like you're the only person in the room doing that.
Hmm.
But the fruit of the message should produce something in you, I think, that not necessarily feels good. I know you used the word comfortable earlier,
Yeah.
right? But discerning all of those things is hard. Um, so yeah, how do you rewire your experiences?
I don't.
What do you think? Because you're telling me that your hopelessness is based on like you feel like you can never get out of this kind of cycle, which is like people presenting some weird view of God to you, controlling
Yeah.
you, pushing you down. So now
Hmm.
you're convinced already at 17, right? You're
Hmm.
almost 18,
Yep.
that there's no hope for you because it's been so abused. You've been like the victim of the abuse. Is that right? Is that why
Yeah.
you're struggling? Or
Yeah.
part of the
I
reason,
have.
or that's part of the struggle, is like you
It's
don't think you could
definitely,
have different experiences?
definitely, and I actually was just thinking about this. I just want like, the quickest yes or no question, just for me, is that is it a sin to fear heaven?
You're asking me what I think?
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you mean by fear heaven? What does that mean?
I remember, and this also has fueled my just loathing for myself. I remember as a kid hearing about heaven, and it sounded scary. Like at least for me, the idea of like an endless, like unchanging eternity, like
Right,
that sounds boring. That's like a stagnation. You know what I mean?
right,
Like a loss of like personal, like a loss of like yourself. Like you can only be happy. And then I started, thinking about, like, is sin a product of free will? And then, people
hmm,
would most likely say yes. And then you would think like, is there sin in heaven? And then, like your
hmm,
answer would most likely be no. So that means that
right,
there's no free will in heaven. And that just scared me. And
right,
maybe I was just
hmm,
intellectually like, because
right.
at 12 you shouldn't be thinking these things. And I just remember that started to fuel like my hatred for myself of like, why do I
Right.
think, because I can be so smart in some areas and then just so dumb in others, you know what I mean? And
Uh,
like,
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I've had this thought, this probably doesn't help, but it's like obviously doing some kind of dualistic thinking, right? Of heaven and then there's hell. It's obviously easier um to talk about heaven than it is hell, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, good news, right? What's
Hmm.
and I joke that there's hockey in heaven. I grew up playing hockey and right in the sea of glass. It's whatever.
Yeah.
Right. It's ice. But I think that there is sort of a element that's like, well, how do you even know heaven's real? Right. And we
Yeah.
don't want to believe hell is real because that just sounds so horrible, right? Like
Yeah.
for all of eternity, and there's people who have made the mistake of like having these extra biblical experiences and then writing about it. I read a book called like The Divine Revelation of Hell. And
Hmm.
anyway, don't read it. But like I don't know, man. I mean, yes, the idea of believing in eternity. I just watched The Matrix recently for a birthday party I did.
Hmm.
And I just like the whole idea of like the Matrix being like, okay, the Matrix is the real world, and everybody else that's not plugged in is living in some kind of simulation. Whereas
Yeah.
you would think it would be the other way around, like plugging in, you're plugging into a simulation. So I remember in
Yeah.
high school, my youth pastor like showed a clip of that in like a youth
Hmm.
group. It's like, this is what eternity is like. It's like the Matrix is eternity. Yeah.
Yeah.
And right. And it's kind of like, okay, I guess that kind of like God would exist outside of time. Like right now,
Hmm.
we're at New Year's Day 2025. Time just keeps going. You can't make time go backwards.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're Back to the Future time machine, right? We all want there to be a time machine, but there's not. And the butterfly effect, and then it's like, well, what if you try to go change something in your past? Blah blah blah. So the idea of eternity, where there's like no construct of time, doesn't really make
Hmm.
sense. I don't think we'll ever understand it with our like human
Well,
capacity. Like we
you
can't.
can't.
And I
You can't
guess
because
if you
time is an illusion.
Well,
Time is an
right.
illusion to help things make sense.
Yeah, and the idea would be if you meditate on these ideas, what does that
Hmm.
do to you as a person? Does it make me a better person to believe like okay, so part of what you're asking is doesn't make a lot of sense because yeah, the idea that so A, you have eternity and you kind of compare that, juxtapose that to like how we understand time. Like it's New Year's Day. Tomorrow it's going to be January 2nd. Like there's
Hmm.
nothing I can do about that. Right. I can't
Yeah.
change that ever. It's like looking forward to a movie coming out or a show. You see a trailer and it's like, oh, this movie comes out in the summer. And you're like, why are you showing me a trailer for the summer? That's so far away. Right. And the next thing you know, it's like the movie's out.
And
Right.
then
It's
it's the
kind of
worst
like
thing you ever saw. No,
yeah, well, I like the new
I
Superman
can't wait for
trailer
that.
dropped,
Cannot wait.
and it's like
Cannot wait.
July 11th. Shout out to my buddy AJ. That's his birthday. We grew up together. But like,
Nuts.
okay, so you right and you go or like Severance season 2. I'm like, it comes out this month, and then
Hmm.
like I didn't get into that show until recently, but the first season was like 2022, and you're like,
Yeah.
dang, dude, people have been waiting 3 years for this almost, right? And so it goes by it ends up going way faster than you would imagine, but eventually it's just going to be there, right? And so it's kind of
Yeah.
like yeah, what does dwelling on that do to you as a person? Because I think what people are trying to kind of preach is like whatever amount of time you have right now outside of quote unquote eternity
Yeah.
is the time that it would do you a disservice to believe that all of the time that you've been given now would be meaningless, right? Would say nothing that I do now matters. And then the flip side of it is that the choices that you do make in a finite amount of time are going to affect quote unquote where you end up. I know I keep saying quote unquote,
Yeah.
where you end up for eternity. And people would say, well, that's not fair,
What
right?
is meaning? Like, Like, what is the meaning of the word meaning? Like you think about these things like
Yeah, well, it's an
there's
interpretation of events,
yeah, and it's
you
like I
know?
think
Yeah,
about like putting meaning into things or like
right.
again hopelessness. It goes back to like I learned like for example like what if I got on this podcast and I just went like fuck poo poo yeah 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 you know people just hear nonsense, you know what I mean?
Right,
But
right,
like at the end of the day, there's always going to be some 70 layers behind, why I did that, how I did it, when I chose to do it. There's always something deeper, no matter how stupid it is. And I just like
right,
that's what kind of kills me inside. Like, why
right.
can't saying the word poop just mean poop? Like, you know what I mean? Like, why? You know what I mean? Like,
For the most part it does.
yeah, but
But
then you
yeah,
think about like
sure.
someone says that they could be acting out. Like I've said things like that, acting out in like we were talking earlier about the doctors and stuff.
Right,
I've said that before, and it's always like a cry for help. Like I'm trying to avoid the conversation. I'm trying to, I'm trying to be funny. I'm trying to do this, and you just read into it, and like everything analyze. So like
right,
you know what I mean? That's and I even then making random noises. I don't even do it to be funny. I do it to prove a point of like there's so many layers of everything, and it just makes you feel like why even like bother? Why
right.
try anything if there's always going to be something else to do, something else to try, something else to derive meaning from and put meaning into? It just seems like we should get Kim Jong Un to drop those nukes pretty soon.
Right, just that the world it would be easier to just be dead and the world to
Exactly.
end. Yeah. Well, right. And then yeah, you could say that and then that could be like a red flag for people like, "Oh, this guy needs help," right? You're just thinking that
Yeah.
the world's gonna end tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, part of the challenge, again, lots of challenging things about this conversation, but part of the challenge is that we look to other sources outside of ourselves
Mhm.
for meaning, right? And you could say that that's like if you're identifying with Christianity, right? You
Yeah.
could say you're looking for meaning in scripture, but
Mhm.
scripture is where we get these ideas, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's not where we get all of the ideas, but it's where we get a lot of them, right? So the idea of heaven, sure, there's other texts and things out there that are outside of scripture that you could say quote like Dante's Inferno is a piece of literature that's like very detailed about hell. And
Yeah.
you could say there's more detail in that than there is in the Bible, right?
Yeah.
And there, where are we getting the idea of like flames and demons and blah blah blah? Yeah, there are other things. So we are looking to something outside of ourselves for the meaning, and people would interpret that as like that's what gives you purpose,
Purpose. It's like
right? Right. Like not you
that's
can't just figure it out on your own.
yeah, and that's also
Right.
like you think like okay, for example, I think the reason faith and religion is such a big thing is that like obviously I personally think atheism or nihilism is the most logical viewpoint. But I also think the reason we need religion and the reason it's so popular is because let's say this, let's say you're religious, right? And you went your through your whole life believing in God. And I know there's some people who will never ever even like be able to fathom that or think about that. But let's just pretend you could. And then turns out that God isn't real. And it is just a like a perpetual state of nothingness beyond the human comprehension. It wouldn't matter. You know what I mean? You believed in God your whole life and died peacefully believing there was one. So you wouldn't even care if there isn't one at the end of your life, Because if it's a complete state of nothingness beyond the human comprehension and we all just go back into the universe as energy, since energy can neither be created or destroyed, then that's why I feel like what's the point of even taking me to church? What's the point of talking about this stuff? Why can't God just be whoever we want him to be? Why can't he just be love? You know what I mean? If at the end of the day there's no one coming from the grave telling us, what death is like, why can't God just be somebody who doesn't judge? God, why does there have to be so many rules? Why do you have to oppress kids who go through puberty and all these things? You know what I mean? He should be someone who guides you, not somebody who oppresses you. And you
Right.
shouldn't fear God. You should never fear God.
Right.
And that's kind of my what I've gotten. And that's like and part of my self-hatred comes from just experiences of telling people that, telling like a pastor, like when your entire religion is predicted on a virgin birth, I'm going to feel free to ignore everything you have to say on the
Mhm.
topic of human reproduction. I'm not going to listen to you. Like when I say something like, prayer is like masturbation. It feels good for the person doing it, but it does nothing for the person being thought about. Like when I say stuff like that, you're going to hell, you demon, And
Right,
that
right,
messed me up so bad, dude. Like
right.
to where I still think about it to this day. And it must be because there's so many other reasons why I hate myself, but that is the reason we've talked about this whole time because that is one of the reasons that just like people
Hmm.
don't understand that your belief system can drastically affect somebody, like
Right.
drastically, you know?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, yeah, it does seem like, yeah, when you hear the word self-hatred, when I do, first of all, I think of my own experiences. I mean, I guess in a general sense, like everything you've shared so far in this episode, I'm going to my own experiences with church, religion, right?
Hmm.
Obviously we're different people, right? And
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily waking up every day thinking, um, this whole Christianity thing is BS, dude. This sucks. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go do my own thing. No,
Oh,
I
no, it's
actually don't.
great, dude.
No, I
It
don't
helps so
think
many
that.
people, It
Well,
helps
right. I
so many
don't
people.
no, but I don't think that. But I'm still under the influence of a lot of ideas that aren't helpful and are
Yeah.
untrue. And I have some friendships and relationships and book club and things where those ideas are challenged, right? And I'm still kind of like, I don't know. Maybe I am just kind of thinking the same thing that I thought as a kid, right? But I
Yeah.
do generally, genuinely, not generally,
Hmm.
genuinely have some amount of hope for the future that I would attribute to some kind of view I have of God, right?
Yeah.
And so I try to hold on to that. But I
Does he
still
make,
struggle with self-hatred, right? Like I
yeah.
do. And it's kind of like it is like, so I guess to bring this more back to you, and I know that I'm
Hmm.
trying to just interject with things that are
Well, can I
keeping,
real quick,
yeah, like back
real
to
quick?
you though. Yeah, what else? Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, real quick, I wanted to bring this last thing to you, and just like a yes or no, like a genuine yes or no.
Okay.
Does Christianity help you or make you happy?
You said help me or make me happy.
Hmm.
What do you mean by help?
However you would like to interpret it.
Oh, yeah. Um, well, I mean, there's lots of unhelpful things. I think we've talked about some of those, right? Like
Yeah.
punitive view of God,
Hmm.
hell, right?
Does
Like,
your view of God help you?
well, I think that it has um helped me not give up in a very general sense, meaning that like I don't believe I'm here by accident, and that even all
Hmm.
the things that I've struggled with mental health have led me to a conclusion that like God is real for
Yeah.
sure. I definitely think that that's true, and I think Jesus is alive and
Hmm.
is way downplayed, misunderstood, right?
Hmm.
Like trying to have a better view of who Christ
Hmm.
is what I should be striving for. And I don't necessarily go around and say I'm deconstructing, right? But I do
Yeah.
think that yeah, I'm on the journey, man. And
So
but
yeah.
are there, and you said does it help me or does it make me happy? Well, I've experienced a lot of unhappiness while being a person of the faith. And I know I'm not the only person that has that experience.
Hmm.
So I would say that there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of like,
Yeah.
um, is my experience of God limited because of the mental health challenges, or
Hmm.
are the mental health challenges derivative? I don't know if that's the right word of the beliefs that I have that are still needing to be redeemed and renewed, right? Meaning
Hmm.
like my um my relationship with my dad as a kid that I've mentioned on here a million times and outside of this podcast.
Hmm.
My dad was a rough guy and was abusive and yelled a lot, and I'm still
Hmm.
projecting on to God the Father
Hmm.
as my dad, right?
Yeah.
Which is disappointing, right? Because my earthly dad has let me down.
Hmm.
And we don't really have much of a relationship now. And I mean, we still talk sometimes and stuff, and it's not very deep. And, I know
Yeah.
he loves me, right? And if I continue to think God is like my dad, then that is, you could say, sad, because it's like God is so much better than that, right? But that's not an overnight rewiring of experiences, right?
So it
That's
gives
not,
you it
yeah.
gives you purpose.
Well, yeah, but I think I think purpose is not just it how is God expressed in life, right? So for me, the expression of God's realness is in the people that are around me, in the things that I see. So yes, the
Hmm.
faith part's always there. We've talked about that some, right? So you don't see something but you still believe. And
Yeah.
so yeah, people are looking for evidence, and it's like, well, the evidence is in the people around you. But
Yeah.
that obviously goes the other way. We've already talked about
Hmm.
that, right? Where people let us down, people are mean.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's more confusing if someone's mean and then they say they're a Christian, or we can be Christian and we could be not self-sacrificial. People who are not of the faith can be more loving than people of the faith.
Hmm.
All of these things exist, right? And there's confusing elements to all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I would say it's helpful, and it leads to a certain level of peace, whatever I choose to do with the things I believe to be true. And I
Yeah.
so to your point of feeling just so hopeless and self-hating,
Hmm.
that's a real thing. But
Yeah.
there's something in you that's still not giving up, even if you
Hmm.
want to say that you have zero of that.
Oh
Right?
shoot.
Like the fact that
Yeah.
you want to go on this podcast and even talk about
Hmm.
the things you're struggling with,
Hmm.
that's not a sign of somebody that doesn't care,
Yeah.
But
Well,
I mean, that's my opinion. Okay.
if it's, I just wanted to like give a little, I guess, monologue to the people, if that's okay.
All right.
Just want to tell everyone who watches the podcast, or just everyone in general, like I feel like absolute. I feel like almost every day, and it is okay to feel like. And there are a lot of people who feel like, and they're able to change themselves. But it is okay if at this moment you are not succeeding in changing yourself. And I just want people to know that, you know, if you feel helpless or hopeless right now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you everything's going to get better, but I am going to sit here and tell you that I feel the exact same way you do. And, if you just, take things little by little, I promise that you may not get better, but you will definitely at least say you tried. And I feel like there can be some comfort in saying, well, I at least tried, or at least I'm continuing to try. Just stick it out and stick it out like I'm about to stick it out. That's all I have to say.
All right, man. Well, I mean, you're ending on a hopeful note, and by stick it out, you mean stay alive?
Yeah, man.
Yeah. All right, man. Hey, brother, I appreciate reconnecting. Thank you for being a guest back on the podcast. All right, bro. I'll let you go, man. We'll be in touch. Thanks
All
for.
right. Thank you, man.
All right,
Thank
man.
you.
Happy New Year's.
All right.
Okay.
Happy New Year.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to the Louder Now podcast. Again, thanks to my friend Max for being on the show. Thanks for being a return guest. We've had a handful of those. Love to do some more return guests in the future. And I appreciate your courage, Max, and your struggle. And we recorded this over a month ago. And I'll check in with you today about what's going on with you, and I just appreciate your vulnerability. Again, as I said in the beginning, that like a lot of people can struggle with their experiences of God and maybe what other people project onto them. It's not exactly there. I think the journey is to not try to get rid of the experiences that you've had or the influences that you've had. That's maybe a tall order. That's very hard to do, but it's important to undistort the view of God. And I'm under the influence of this idea that God is good, even though fill in the blank I've struggled with bipolar, depression, anxiety, suicide, and so have so many other people who aren't giving up on their faith. And so Max's struggle is real. I mean, it's very to live in that tension of healing from things that have happened to you or what's been projected onto you. So I hope you guys got something out of this as far as kind of picking up on that tension. And I'd love to have kind of more of these conversations in the future. So, Max, thanks for being a guest. All the info's in the notes. Guys, best way to find me is Instagram. I'll put that link in the notes. And you can always email me, jared.deal@gmail.com. Would love to see if you'd like to be a guest. If you have any feedback on the episode, I would love that as well. If you have a similar experience and you'd love to tell me about that, I'd love to talk to you as well. As always, thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you next time.